All right, good morning. Well, at the beginning of the week, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to speak on, and as I mentioned, it was kind of a tough week for the last couple of weeks, working in the yard with this rain. There's a lot of yards to be mowed, and I kind of got a little bit tired. And when you're tired, physically, mentally, you kind of almost shut down and not ready to take on any other great responsibilities. But like I said, once you know where to go for your strength and for your regeneration, it helps. If you go to God and talk to Him and just take time and to relax and to re-energize and to pray, and He will provide a way. So, and that's when you reach out to friends and ask for help, and things get a little bit easier. But this morning I want to kind of go back to a lesson that I gave last year, but I kind of modified it, and it's almost a lesson of reflection. The original title was Freedom to Serve, but I've kind of changed it and altered it a little and renamed it to On God's Time, because that's what it's all about. As I reflect back in the past year of almost a month ago or a year ago that I was laid off, and how things have changed and how God has laid the plan out for me to where I be today. So a lot of times it's good to kind of look back in the past year to see where you were, what type of plan God had for you, and how it just kind of fell into place. Maybe not the way that you had thought, but it all worked out. The key is for His good. And when it's for His good, you benefit from it. And the less you struggle, the less you put on yourself, the easier it is. In Lamentations chapter 3, verses 25 and 26, from the ESV, it says, "The Lord is good to those who wait for Him, to the soul who seeks Him. It is good that one should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord." Think about that. The Lord is good to those who wait on Him, who seeks after His salvation. Not seek it loudly, but quietly. There's a time for meditation. There's a time to kind of slow down your life and just kind of reflect and to see where you have been, where you're headed, and be thankful for what God has done for you. As you look at that word wait, what does that mean? Well, in many different translations, they replace it with different words from our English language. In the NIV, it says, "The Lord is good to those who hope for Him." And the NLT, it says, "The Lord is good to those who depend on Him." And the NET Bible, it says, "to trust." So it can mean a variety of things. But one of the words that I thought of when I was reading this particular verses is a waitress, a waiter. I think another meaning is when you're there, I think the Lord is good to those who serve Him. To make sure that His needs are taken care of. That is, to serving each other, caring for the sick, caring for the needy, praying for those that are in distress, just being prepared to care for His people. Another definition that I came across of wait is stay where one is or delay action until a particular time or until something else happens. So when you wait on the Lord, it requires patience. A lot of times human nature is we want to rush into things. It's a knee-jerk reaction to something is happening in our life. And we've read many stories of God's people when they took their life in their own hands and try to change things, thinking that their way is the best way, and then ultimately they make it even worse. Lot's children, Lot's daughter, they weren't patient on the Lord. God would provide Lot with a wife, but they took it upon themselves to do something that was unholy, and look what they created, enemies of Israel. So a lot of times if we are not patient enough and not wait on Him, not hope in Him, not depend on Him, not trust in Him, things become chaotic in our life. Our plan just unravel. And we're saying, we try to get out of debt and we do things to try to get out of it. And we look down the road, it's like, I'm in a worse situation now than I was. Because we didn't depend on God. We took it upon ourselves, thinking that our way was the best. So as I, reflected back upon God, upon this last year, what I've learned is the more I depend upon God, follow His plan, things will work out for the best. And it's just amazing to see how His plan was laid out for me. The years before last year, how He prepared my life to take on the layoff. How He prepared my heart, my mind, my attitudes, so that when that happened, I would respond, not react, respond in a more positive manner. Instead of blaming Him, getting angry at my boss, getting angry at my family, and just, all these negative reactions that I did in the past. So the past mistakes kind of helped me to handle last year's situation a lot better, because of the 3 layoffs and 3 or 4 layoffs and firings and job losses. I learned that, hey, God was there all the way. Even though I was a jerk at it, I was impatient, I was whining, but He was always there for me and provided an escape. And as I reflect, you see how all of it worked out for His good. So as we kind of delve into this morning, hopefully, I will share with you the 3 points that I learned. How God put me in a place where I was able to handle that situation a lot better than I did 20 years ago. The key was, He was there. The key was creating a new heart in me. That was number 1. Second, preparing for service. And then finally, serving with love. The kind of 3 steps that I went through in my progression the last year to be where I am today. I had to have a new heart before I could move on to the next step, before He was ready to prepare me for service. If my heart was not right, then I would not be receptive to work at and put myself in a position to help others. And then when I was ready to help, it was not out of obligation, it was not out of duty, it was not out of, the Scriptures commanded this, but rather out of sincere love for my neighbors, my friends, my family. And to get this point across, we're going to go back to the Old Testament and kind of learn from the old patriarchs, of how God worked through them to prepare them for a greater service. In Psalms 51 verse 10, very familiar, nothing new. Everything that we read about, everything that we go over is nothing new, but rather it's to remind us of who we need to lean on and what we need to ask for in our life. As David speaks to God in the point of his life where he's made so many mistakes and he's ready to change, he's ready to move on, but the first step into moving on is to change his heart. So in verse 10 it says, he asked God, if you want to ask God for anything, begin with this. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. That's the key to everything. Turning your pessimism, your negative thoughts into positive. Turning your heart of stone into a soft, fleshly heart. And it's not going to get there until you reach a point in your life when you are ready for that. God cannot make you. He can't force a new heart into you. Your family can't do it. No one can. It only comes from you. When you are ready, when you're ready to kneel before Him and ask Him to create in you a new heart, He will. And when He does, be ready, because it changes everything. It takes many years to build a wall around your heart. It takes many years for your heart to harden. And it can take years to soften it. But God, from the beginning, wants everyone to be in His fold. He wants everyone to be in His family. He wants everyone to be in His service, to do good for this world. So as I look back in this past life, this past year, was it coincidence where I am today? We've talked about this many times. Was it providence? God's plan from the beginning? Just think about it. It's kind of hard to wrap your mind around where you are today was designed from the beginning. God is outside of our time constraints, so He sees the past, the current, and the future. He sees when you were born. He sees kind of where you're going to head. He's going to lay down a plan for you and put people in your life, situations in your life to kind of guide you in that direction. A lot of times, the plan is laid there, but as humans, we want to divert. It's like, I got a better plan. And He'll try to get you back, steer you back each time by giving you obstacle challenges, stresses in your life to try to wake you up. So it's providence, designed from the beginning to put me where I am today. And as I thought about that, I kind of looked and see what the providence, the meaning behind providence was and how it all intertwined and work. And it's amazing. It's just not a design for the moment, but it incorporates the whole universe. It says the sovereign, providence defined as the sovereign's divine superintendence of all things, guiding them toward the divinely predetermined end in a way that is consistent with their created nature, all to the glory and praise of God. So this plan, this life that we live, the plan that He has for us it's not for us. It's for Him. To praise Him, to glorify Him in everything. It encompasses the universe from creation to consummation, to human existence, to our destiny. All of it. It's kind of hard to comprehend and take that in. And when I was studying this, it brought me to Philippians chapter 2 and verse 13. For it is God who works in you, both to will and to work for His good pleasure. So when you pray for a new heart, this is where it's going to lead you. For His good pleasure. To do good for Him. So when He created this heart in us, as He did for Moses. Then he begins to prepare you for service. Once your heart's ready, then he said, all right, I'm going to give you some little tasks for you to do to get you ready for the bigger task at hand. So as we look at the life of Moses, it took him 80 years to prepare Moses for the greatest task of his life. That was to go back to the land of Egypt to free his people. 80 years. Would you be willing, be patient enough to wait 80 years, ready for God to do good in your life and for you to do good for Him? In Acts chapter 7, verses 30, beginning there, he kind of gives a brief summary of when Moses first encountered God, seeing the burning bush. And if you think about it, normally at 80 years old, it's about the downside of our life. You know, most people are getting ready to sink the last putt on the last hole when you're 80. You know, we're kind of promised 70 years. If you get 80 years, that's a great blessing. Moses was 80, and his life was just beginning. Life is winding down, literally and figuratively. You know, when we're 80, we're about to accomplish as much as we could in our life. And yet, God saved Moses' greatest public work for the last third of his life. When you ask God to prepare a heart, are you ready to do great works for Him? So as his story unfolds, as we go back and read of the life of Moses, we'll find out that the first 40 years of his life was a cakewalk, in our modern term. Yes, when he first started out, Pharaoh was destroying the babies, but his life was spared. He was adopted into the royal family, raised up in privilege. He was referred to many times as the Prince of Egypt. And he was kind of like the athlete walking down the hall. Yeah, that's the man. He's got it all. And he did. Until God touched his heart the first time. When he noticed that a slave was being mistreated, he stood up and protected that person and took another's life to defend the weak. And because of that, he was exiled. So the next 40 years, what did he do in the land, in the wilderness, in a foreign land? Well, he spent it hiding. In the desert, doing nothing. Well, not really nothing. He spent it as a shepherd. But certainly, coming from royalty, he should have been out teaching and preaching, but he wasn't doing that. Instead, he was tending sheep. He wasn't out giving great speeches, how to become a great leader, how to become a prince of Egypt. He wasn't doing any of that. But rather, he was shearing sheep and fighting off predators and cleaning up sheep poo. Does that sound glamorous to you all? No, it doesn't. But does that sound familiar? Sometimes we're raised up in privilege. When we live in the United States, we are being raised up in privilege. When the world looks at us, they see us as a Prince of Egypt walking down the hall and say, look at that, he's got everything. But then there's times that we encounter challenges, layoffs, financial difficulties, health issues, family issues, conflict, whether it be at work, whether it be at school, whether it be at home. We struggle through that. We fight through it. A lot of times we don't realize that during those times that God is preparing us for better things. But as humans, we focus so much on the moment that we don't see the whole picture. When Moses was going through those things, do you think he saw the big plan? Do you think he's like, man, I see that God's preparing me for a great thing, to lead his people? No. A lot of his life was reacting to situations. But for those 40 years in the desert, what was God doing? He was preparing. He was working on Moses' heart, softening it, tenderizing it, preparing it, so that he would be ready to care for God's people. In essence, he was doing heart work. As Moses was tending the sheep, God was tending to his heart. So when we're working at our job, when we're working in the yard, when we're preparing meals for our families, at the same time, God's working on your heart for greater things. He was teaching Moses to lead the people of Israel by teaching him how to tend sheep. It required a lot of patience, tenderness, kindness, perseverance, long hours, sleepless nights, because he wanted to protect them from the predators. As Moses worked the sheep, God was preparing his heart to work with people. 40 years seems a long time to do this. But a lot of times, as stubborn as we are, it takes that long to get us ready to serve God. In a society where we want everything now, that's not how God works. So once we understand how God works, it will help us to be more patient in our life and be more understanding of, okay, this is for my betterment. I just have to be patient, trust in God, remember, depend on Him, wait on Him, and He'll bless us. So 40 years, in our eyes, seems to be a long time for God to work. But as through this story and through our life, and as we look back on our life, that is how God works. He's slow. It takes time. But if we just let like a stew, just let it cook, let it simmer. And over time, once it's ready, it will be the best stew, S-T-E-W, that you ever tasted. So God's patient with you. He's going to let you simmer. He's going to let you cook. But once you're ready, you're going to do great things. I will do great things. All of us will do great things. Look at Abraham. When he made the promise, how long it took before he received his son. Look at King David when he was anointed. Look how long it took before he became king. In between time, he was preparing him for that kingship, for that leadership. Tending sheep, standing up to Goliath, standing up to Saul. All those things is getting ready for him for greater things. And as look at my life, look at your life. Look at the many years that He's preparing you for greater things. David told his story. Look how many years it took to prepare him for greater things in Haiti. Look at Chris, preparing him for greater things in Togo. Those are great things, but also in our community. Beforehand, I could never imagine, stepping out of my comfort zone and helping my neighbors. I told my mom the other day, before this past year, all the time, all the health issues that she went through, yes, I would have been there, but my heart would have responded differently. I would have done it out of obligation. Yes, she's my mom. She's taken care of me all these years. Okay, she's sick, so I'm going to go up there kind of grudgingly. Have to make sacrifices out of work, take vacation time to go up there and spend a week, help her recover from her back surgery. But I told her, that was years ago. Now, you call me, I'll come. Doesn't matter if I have to use vacation. It's a heart change. But your heart cannot change unless you're ready. Until your heart, He gives you a new heart, then you're not ready to be prepared for service. Your heart change, then God's going to prepare you for service. And then when that is accomplished, when you serve out of love. And a perfect example is a story that I came across in Luke chapter 14. And we're familiar with this reading. The story of the banquet. And we read this verse, I think, many times this year. Before my heart was changed and before I was ready for God to help me serve people, I didn't see this verse at all. When this story tells about a man coming to a banquet and Christ tells him that, don't put yourself in a high seat, set yourself in a lower seat. So when the host of the banquet comes in, he'll move you to the higher seat, because out of the kindness of his heart, instead of removing you and putting somebody else in that seat that's more important. That's the story that I've seen a lot of times in the past, of humility, of humbling yourself, not putting yourself in the best situation. We're parking up front and things like that, getting in the front of the line, teaching you as children to humble yourself, let others go before you. But what verse that caught my eye this time around was in verse 8, about telling this host that when you do have a banquet, when you host a party, don't just invite your friends, but rather invite those that are disenfranchised, the weak, the poor, the needy, the blind, those that are less fortunate. I never saw that before until now. And that's in verses 12 through 14 instead of verse 8. Verses 12 through 14. Not only invite your friends, but those that are less fortunate. But to reach that point, my heart had to be in a different place. It had to be soft. I had to be aware of those situations and those people, and to be willing to sacrifice my respect of persons. A lot of times when we look at the people that are poor, they're not probably the most tidy, most clean. So a lot of times they may not be able to take a shower or bath but once a week. And we kind of look down upon that. They may not look the very best. We just feel uncomfortable around people or situations that we're not familiar with. But with the right heart, with the right service, that doesn't matter. Look at Christ. To Him, to God, we are filthy rags. But He came to us anyway. He bowed down before His disciples and washed their feet. Can't we do the same? We have to look beyond what's the physical, what they look like, the appearance, and humble ourselves and serve man, and to love them for their weaknesses, for their situations, and help them out of it. Christ helped us out of ours. He forgave us of our sins. He helped us defeat death. He raised us up. Shouldn't we do the same for our fellow man? If they're struggling financially, help them through it. Don't enable the situation, but help them through it. Show them a better way. If they're hungry, feed them. Don't just pray for them that their bellies be full. Take them a meal. Invite them to your house. Cook them a banquet. Prepare a banquet for them. If they're naked, clothe them. If they need shelter, find a place for them. If their home is crumbling, get your hammers out. Get your saws, get your nails, and help show up their place. But we can't do any of that stuff if our heart is not right, if we have not allowed God to prepare our hearts for service, and we're not going to serve without love. It will not happen. So as we leave here this morning, keep the story of Moses in mind. Reflect back upon your life. Look at God's plan, His providence for you. All in the whole scheme of things, His plan for your life is to do great things. And to do great things, start out small. Start within your family and build out. Pray for a clean heart, a pure heart, a new heart. Ask God to prepare you for service. And when you do serve, ask God to help you to serve with love in your heart. And you know what? Great things will happen in your life, in your family, in your community, in this world. You will be a world changer if you just wait upon the Lord and trust in Him.